Zevahim Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, 16 lines down. Continuing the halacha, where do we know that Zar, a non-Kohen, that does the Avodah, makes it pasul? Rav Mesharshi Rav Mesharshi says, Atem Kavahomer, we can learn a Kavahomer, Miyoshev, a person, a Kohen that sits while doing Avodah. Mayoshev, Sheochel, if a Kohen who's sitting makes, and he can still eat the korban in ma'avad hila, but if he sits while doing the avodah, he makes a pasul. Zar she'eno ochel, a non-kohen who can't eat, eno din she'im ma'avad hila, so for sure if he does the avodah, it's also pasul. The Gemara says 1 second, "Ma yoshev she'ken pasul edut." But 1 second, sitting is also a different problem that what? You can't sit while testifying. So therefore you can't compare sitting to eating, or doing the avodah rather. The Gemara says, "Mi yoshev tamid chacham," yeah, there is a person who can testify while sitting down, and tamid hacham can. Therefore, no proof to Azar. The Gemara says, "Ma l'shem Yosef sheken pazulut." Okay, fine, but this is general halacha that a person who's sitting can't testify. So therefore, you should also bring that restriction to us. The Gemara says, "Shem Yosef lo parich." Rashi doesn't hold that as a question because as long as this is a exception to the rule that the Tamid Hacham does not sit, therefore it's not a question. Even if you want to say that it is a problem, it is a refutation. Ati Miyoshev Hada Hanach, he can learn from a non Tamid Hacham sitting, and also from another comparison, a Kohen with a mum, or an Onen, or a guy who is Tamid. Okay, the Gemara says Yoshev the kasher b'kibbaman. I know that a Yoshev, a guy who is sitting to do the avodah, is kasher to do it by the private bama, by his private mizbeach that we used to have. Markira la'amod lifnei Hashem l'shar. Told lifnei Hashem with lifnei bama, only in front of the mizbeach of Hashem, but not your private bama. It is kasher. Onen. We said in the Mishnah that an onen, a person who's in avilut, he cannot bring a korban if he does it, it makes it pasul. The Gemara says, "Minan how you know this? Diktiv, umina mitash lot yaseh v'lo halal." You should not leave the kohen gadol should not leave, and you shall not make it halul. You should not make it mundane. Ha'ahar shelu yaseh halal. There's another type of kohen that can make it problem by serving. We're assuming that's the onen. The Gemara says, "Rabbi Elazar Amar mehacha hen hikrivu ani hikrafti." Right? That we learn. Rabbi Elazar says a different pasuk. Pasuk says when Aaron brought the hatat after his son passed away, Nadav and Avihu, Moshe accused him of saying that the reason why you burnt the korban, the hatat, even though it wasn't supposed to be burned, was must be that Elazar, Nadav and Avihu brought it, and that's why you burnt it. And then Aaron said, "No, I brought it," seemingly telling you that what? It sounds like if the Elazar and Tamar brought it, Shapir is that if it would have been burnt because it was pasul, proving from here that Onan can't bring. The Mar says, but how come he didn't bring the other pasul to teach you that? He says, the pasul doesn't say it outright. You made an inference, and we don't necessarily say that inference that may not be true. It could be that the Onan's kasher. The Mar says, okay, but so how come the Tanakh did not learn it from the pasuk of Aharon? The Mar says, who says it is because of the Onan that it would have been burnt? Maybe it was burnt because it was tameh. The better Ishmael Tana break different proof for onen. Atem the kavachomer ba'amur being the kavachomer from onen from a kohen that has a mum blemish. Buma because why? Amud bet ba'amum she'ochel a kohen with a mum he can eat the korban. In mavar hilal if it does it it's a puzzle. Onen she'en ochel an onen that can't bring it who can't eat it rather. Enodin she'im mavar hilal if he brought the korban and if for sure she basul. Where it says, "Malba mum she'eken asa bo kerevin kimakrivin." 1 second, a guy with a mum has a special disqualification in the Torah that is if whatever he brought, um, just like the Kohen can have a mum, the Korban can have a mum, the animal can have a mum, also can be basul. And it only applies to those people, not to the actual Korban. It's like the mum has a double factor. Not only the Kohen can make a pasul by being having a mum, but also the animal can have a pasul by having a mum. Gemara says Zayochiach, a non-Kohen, is a proof that that's not a problem because why? The non-Kohen is not limited elsewhere. Only limited to the non-Kohen. No such thing as an animal that's a problem with the Zar. The Gemara says, Mal Zar Sheken in Takana, but the Zar is different because why? He's never able to bring a Korban. He's always going to be a non-Kohen versus Onen, for example, only applies to the one doing the Avodah, only applies when he's an Onen. The Gemara says, Mal Zar Sheken Abal mum yochech. But a mum will prove that's not the case because mums can heal, but it's still pasul if you brought it as a mum. The Gemara says, "B'zar hadin, b'hazar hadin." Now we're going to bounce off all the factors. Each one has their own factor. Lo rizeh, rizeh, lo rizeh. The nature of this one is not like the other one, etc. Asajran, what's the common denominator? Mutarin, they're all warned. V'mavdu hilon, if they did the avodah, it's pasul. So therefore, we're trying to bring from all these cases. Afani, therefore, I'll bring also the case of I bring the case of Onan teach you Shemuzar, he's also warned not to do the Avodah, and therefore teaching you the halacha from the other cases, Ve'im Abat Hila, that if he did the Avodah, regardless, it makes it pasul. The Gemara says, Hey Muzar, we know that Onan can't bring it. Ilim, we had this exact paragraph before. Ilim, say, if you want to bring proof from that pasul that we shall not leave, Hilu B'Kufektive, then it already writes that it makes it pasul, seemingly. Why would that be a proof? Seemingly, that would be you don't need a Kavah Hamra. That would be the perfect proof. So it can't be that. Ela Menin Hai Mein Kri, when you bring the Pasuk from Aharon Kohen, because if I'm a plan, he holds that the Korban was burnt because it was an Onen, and that's the proof that you can't bring it. Gemara says, Igla Mifrach, 1 second. That's not a good Kavah Hamra. Mal Tezron Ken Lo Hitrum Mikalo. There's a difference because why? A Mum Kohen and a non Kohen have another common denominator that what? They will never have a exemption to that rule. There's no exemption to a non-Kohen or a mum Kohen doing avodah, while a Kohen Gadol can do avodah while onen. So maybe you can compare the cases. The Gemara says, Tamei ochiach. A guy who's Tamei will prove that's not the case because it also has a exception and it's still possible if you do it. The Gemara says, Ma Tamei shekein mitamei, but Tamei is different because not only is Tamei not only limited to the person, but it also another problem that it has, it can make other people tameh. So they can't bring again. Same exact concept. Therefore, we go by the common denominator that it's all warned that they can't do the avodah, and therefore you bring onin as well. The Gemara says, okay, who says it's a good comparison? You can't compare it. Why? Because the Kohen Gadol who's tameh, a Kohen who's tameh, a Kohen who has a mum, and a zar, a non-Kohen, they also have another common denominator. There's no exception to a Kohen Gadol by private. Meaning, a Kohen Gadol that brings a Korban by private while he's an Onen is mutar. But these three other people, Tameh Kohen, Mum Kohen, and a non-Kohen, can never bring a Korban. No, Shem Tumah Mi'emit Ishtere. Technically, yes, because Tumah can be mutar by the case of a korban for tzibur. If it's tameh, there's cases where if majority of an Israel is tameh, it'll be mutar. Okay, next. Rashi Amar, another proof for avodah that an onen cannot bring it. Ata kavah hamer miyoshev brings the kavah hamer for a person, a kohen who sits while doing avodah. Ma yoshev v'shochel, a kohen who's sitting can eat. Mavad chilel v'does the avodah at pasul. Onen she'eno ochel, onen who can't eat. Eno din she'im mavad chilel. So for sure, if he does the korban, it's pasul. Mar says mal yoshev she'ken pasul adud. 1 second. The same thing as before as well. But we know he can't sit, and sitting is different because we see sitting can even nullify testimony. So how can you bring a proof over here? The Gemara says the Chacham can sit. We said seen that thing before, but general is a constant sitting that therefore you can't bring a proof. The Gemara says no, you can't bring a proof once there's an exception. If you want to say there's a question, you can say there's a combination proof, a combination from the case of a testimony, sitting testimony, and another proof of the mum tameh or zar. Okay, onen pasul, we know onen pasul. How do we know marva? Lo shana ala bekorban achid only applies to private korban. Ala bekorban sibur benazeh, but regarding to a public sibur, the avodah that's done by onen is kasher. Kal v'chomer mituma because they bring a kal v'chomer from tameh, a kohen is tameh. Ma tuma shelo to meklal it's the kohen gadol bekorban achid. In a case of tumah, which is not patur. Yani it's not it's pasul and according to Kohen Gadol when he's bringing his private korban. It's still allowed for a regular kohen to bring a korban while it's for a public korban. And I know which is mutar for a kohen gadol while he's bringing a private korban. So therefore, it should for sure be allowed to a regular kohen and by a public korban. Gemara says now that we established that Kava Homer, he took three things for granted that they're true, and now we're going to knock them out one at a time. What's the first one? He said the three things that he goes on this thing is number one, doing an avodah while tameh is pasul by a private korban, even by the kohen gadol. Second thing he assumes is an avodah by tum'ah is kasher for public korban, even by a regular kohen. And the third thing he assumed is the avodah by a kohen gadol onen is kasher even by a private korban. The Gemara says, "Makif Rabbi Barai." First question. Lo tutaranu es the kohen gadol bekorban yachid mikal v'chomer. 1 second. Who says the kohen gadol's private korban is kasher? Well, maybe it's pasul from the following kal v'chomer. Uma tum'ah shutra es the kohen gadol besibur. If tum'ah, which is patur from a kohen, a regular kohen, by a korban that's public, lo tries kohen gadol by a kohen echid. It's still kasher by a private kohen, kohen gadol korban. And a nut lo tries kohen gadol by sibur, but a nut is not mutar by a kohen gadol by a regular kohen by a public communal korban. Enodin shlo tries kohen by echid. The kohen gadol cannot bring it by echid. Therefore, we knocked out the first thing that he assumed. Also, the next thing that what? Who says that Tuma is patur by a Kohen Gadol by private korban? Meaning, who says it's kasher? I'll knock it out. If by an onen is not kasher by a Kohen, a regular Kohen, ananut by a kohen for a public korban. Who try etzel kohen gadol b'kohen nechid. The kohen gadol is allowed to do it by private. Tuma shu try etzel kohen gadol b'kohen tzibur. Tuma, which is kasher by a regular kohen in the case of a public korban. Eno din shu try etzel kohen gadol b'kohen nechid. Maybe it should be mutar by a kohen gadol by a private korban. Third knockoff. The tuma should not be kasher by a regular kohen in the case of a public korban from the following kavachomer. If aninut and onen is kasher to a kohen gadol by a private korban, yet is still pasul by a regular kohen for a public korban. Tuma lo hetura es kohen gadol b'kohen echid. Now tuma, which is not kasher by a private korban of a kohen gadol, eno din shlo tutar b'kohen gadol b'tzivon. So for sure not be kasher by a regular kohen's public korban. What does the Gemara say? Ella ikal mifrahachi ikal since we're able to knock out the kavachomer, we're able to bring the kavachomer different ways. Kol hada v'hada telikul. Each pasuk should be learning what you're supposed to teach you initially, and therefore you should be learning it via the Pesukim and not via Kavahomers because we're not sure which way to learn the Kavahomer basis of the questions that we had. And therefore, a public Korban can be brought in Tumah by a Kohen Gadol and Rabbi Kohen, and a private Korban for Tameh should even be Pasul, possibly by the Kohen Gadol as well. Baruch Olam, men v'men.